Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Triumph Strength and Performance podcast. In today's episode, the team is joined by Coach Matyson Frazier. Matyson coaches up in the Washington area and has been a huge influence on collaborating with the team. Matyson's background is a bit unique compared to some of the other guests we've had on the podcast, since he does do some in person training as well. Throughout the podcast, the coaches talk about Matyson's upbringing as a coach, what it's like to coach both in person and online at the same time, his passions in the sport, and some of the concepts they've changed their thoughts on over time. If you like this, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, and check out our content on Instagram at TriumphSNP. Thank you for listening and enjoy.
All right, Madison, let's get started.
Cool. All right.
Give us a general run through of what got you into coaching, the general spiel of who you are as a coach, what it's like for you coaching,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
So I got into coaching and I was in college still. So I guess I went to school for business, and then through doing that and talking to people and whatever, I pivoted into exercise science from business, just something I was much more passionate about because I had gotten into lifting in high school and then started taking it seriously in college, and then pivoted into being something that I really cared about and wanted to learn more about. Um, so then I probably started coaching people end of my sophomore year, beginning of my junior year. And it was mostly just like friends and mutual colleagues who were interested in working out, didn't really know what they were doing. So I had a handful of clients that I was working with that were mostly just friends when I started out. And then my junior year, I started doing practicum with my university's strength and conditioning program for their athletics. And then that turned into my senior year doing my full-time internship through the strength and conditioning program that they had there. So that was, I would say, like the real start of it, even though it wasn't powerlifting coaching. I was technically like full-time coaching people in college in athletics, like football, swim, all of them. I was working with lots of different groups. And then graduated from college, moved and started working at gym near me, Northwest Barbell, over in Washington. And then I've been training there since and just doing full-time coaching between powerlifting. And then I have in-person clients that range in their training goals. I have some people who are just general fitness and people who are powerlifting as well.
The two things for you that I feel like are more unique relative to like, kind of like or the group chat that we have and other coaches is that you coach in person and um, just what your local scene's like. Because when we had Allie Davy on here last, I feel like a large influence for her as a coach was like her local scene, like the whole like MSUPL deal with her. Um, so I'm curious for you, like what is the significance of how you built things in person and what your local scene is like in powerlifting in general and how that's and both of those things have influenced like the coach you are today.
Yeah, the local scene over here in Washington is pretty interesting. Um, it's definitely USAPL dominated in terms of the amount of events that there is. But the spread of participants is pretty even, I would say, across multiple federations. USAPL definitely leads just from the sheer volume of meets that they have. They definitely have the most people sign up. But WRPF now, Powerlifting United, is pretty big. I would say they're growing the most rapidly here, at least since the transition from WRPF to Powerlifting United. And then USPA has a decent amount of meets around here, but I wouldn't say they're really like prominent in terms of you hear about people, oh, did you hear about this USPA meet? We got to go do it, sort of deal, you know? They kind of have like a standard, I would say, like 4 or 5 meets a year that they run out of the same locations. And they have pretty good loyalty at like those locations of people who turn out, but definitely the Powerlifting United and USAPL are the biggest. Starting out when I was going here, so my gym, Northwest Barbell, like it doesn't have any um, federation like affiliation. Now I would say it's mostly Powerlifting United. We have the most people who compete there who are Powerlifting United. So my exposure to like getting into coaching in general was very USAPL pilled like my first 6 months, I would say, just of like doing USAPL competitions and kind of having that be where I saw myself being with coaching the meets I went to, the kind of lifters I was going to have. But the local scene here is definitely way more spread out. So, like in my first year of being here and doing coaching, I would say it was a pretty even split between the WRPF, USPA, and USAPL meets that I was attending and had athletes at. Um, and it really depends too on where you are in the state. Like I know you guys are on the opposite side of the country, so you're not super familiar with Washington. But basically, like most of Eastern Washington is pretty like farmland-y. And then the west side of Washington is like Seattle and the more like lush Cascadia that you kind of think of. And so you have a ton of meets over on this side and then like a handful of meets over on the eastern side of Washington. And eastern Washington is pretty much exclusively USAPL ran events over there. Not a ton going on otherwise that I know of at least. And then really between like top of the state to bottom of the state, it can go any way on the west side of Washington, just depending on what city you're in and what gyms are there. So it's an interesting scene. And then for the in-person side of things, that was not that crazy of a shift for me in terms of doing in-person stuff because working with like strength conditioning program stuff, you're doing a lot of people in person all the time through your day. Um, but definitely shifting from training groups of athletes to like one-on-ones with more gen pop and figuring out how to train them and, working around a lot more movement inefficiency and lack of mobility than I was used to seeing. It was definitely pretty challenging to just make that mental shift of like, you get someone who's interested in training with you, they're like, okay, I'm going to do 2 times a week for like a month, and then we'll decide after there. And you're like, well, we show up on day one, and then like person can't do a quarter squat without like tipping over onto their toes, sort of deal, and being like, all right, well, this is the first time I've had to deal with this before, so how do we go from here? So the in-person side of things has been really rewarding for me in the way that now when it comes to general movement and efficiency for people in powerlifting, well, I wouldn't say that I'm as skilled from like looking at things in a biomechanicals perspective as someone that I feel like Alex is really good at identifying those sort of things. I feel like I have worked with a lot of people who don't necessarily have that general movement efficiency that you need. And so I've spent a lot of time, I would say, with people who are less accustomed to whether it be squatting to death or whatever general movement that they're trying to pursue in their training. I have a lot of experience now with getting people to the point where they're able to do the movement efficiently. And then over time now, I've been trying to get better at those finer details for people. And obviously, I have those power lifters who are efficient and they're on my roster and have been training, and they're not as much the general population people. Um, but that is definitely, I would say, the biggest thing I've got in person is not necessarily looking at the super minor, figuring out how to optimize foot pressure sort of deal and being like, this person cannot like squat and stay upright. How do we fix this?
Yeah. Maybe I missed this, but do you do any powerlifting in person, or is it
I
more so?
do. I do. It's usually people, I mean, I've had a handful of clients who have done powerlifting training with me in person. But most of the powerlifting clients that I have are some combination of the two. So I will either, like, if I'm at the gym, and I'm sure you guys are similar in this, it's like if you're at the gym with a client of yours and they're asking questions, like, I'm going to answer them and give them the best information that I can. I'm not going to like shut them down and be like, talk to me when we have the Stripe payment set up for this session. Um, but there's been a handful of people who are, they do the online coaching and then they'll set up like individual sessions. And usually is as long as we have a pretty detailed idea of what we're going into to work on, I'll kind of just charge them based on whatever the amount of time we spend in the gym is, because sometimes you'll have someone who wants to work on bench press, but like the bench press portion of their workout is only going to take 20 to 30 minutes tops. So I'm not going to build that person the same way that I would someone who is doing hour-long sessions on a routine basis that isn't paying for the online coaching portion of what we're doing. And then I've had a couple of people who just do entirely in person with their powerlifting coaching. I had one girl who, for about a year and a half, we did twice a week sessions, and it was just in person coaching. And then she had a couple of days that she did on her own. But yeah, I've done the in person powerlifting coaching, and it's definitely nice to have that sort of hands on ability with people. But also, I think generally speaking, kind of as you guys know from doing online coaching, people who are pretty efficient at certain movements, you don't find them yourself tweaking them a lot all the time. And so then sometimes those in-person sessions become repetitive because the person's efficient at the movement and you feel bad for making them pay for you standing there for an hour and nodding your head basically. Um, but yeah, I've done some of that, but most of the powerlifting stuff still has some element of being online. And usually scattered in is an in-person session or talking in person. But yeah,
I feel like the in-person like coaching side of powerlifting is so interesting. Like especially
yeah,
for that like population of people who aren't coming from like, oh, I've been, doing squat, bench, and deadlift for like 2, 3 years, and they're kind of like in that like late novice to like early intermediate type of experience level. Like you get so much done in an
yeah,
in-person session versus like you get one of those like newbies on like your roster for like coaching, and it's like it would take weeks for someone to like get a certain movement pattern down that you could get down in like an hour in an in-person
yeah.
session. Like it's
And
it's so
that
much easier to take them from point A to point B.
Yeah, and that's definitely the side with like when I talked about the more broad scope of technique of getting to work with people. I feel like I've gotten really, really good at like taking someone who's like never benched more than the bar
Yeah.
and taking them into a session and having them like walk out and they have pretty solid bench technique. I mean, there's obviously room to improve from you can't get it all out of one bench session, make someone the best bencher in the world. But you can really do a lot with that in-person time. There's so many people know not a damn thing about like drive, even just like bracing. The idea of bracing on bench press is a totally foreign concept to people, even just in general. It's amazing how many people I talk to who just don't know what bracing is, who have been lifting for maybe like 6 months on their own, and then they want to get someone to train them because either they're interested in doing a meet or just like they feel like they've kind of lost steam, they don't know what to do next. And then you go and talk to them about like, oh yeah, you're gonna want to like take a breath, or you're gonna want to try to not sit into your toes when you're squatting. When you deadlift, that thing that people are doing with their hips isn't for no reason. It's actually to do something on deadlift. But I feel like I've gotten good at having like a 5 to 10 minute game plan of like we're going to go from no ability to do the movement efficiently, and then within like 5 minutes of working on it, we can get a pretty efficient movement down. And that is definitely rewarding. And then that's where I said, like, I feel like I have a lot of experience with that. And so what I'm trying to get better at is refining those finer details and really trying to work on getting to teach those in person better too. Because a lot of the things are pretty easy to demonstrate and talk about. And I mean, this extends to the online coaching side of things too. You know how to explain things well, you know how to demonstrate it yourself. But getting it to click with someone else can be pretty difficult. And the in-person portion of that definitely helps, but it's something that I feel like I definitely can continue to get better.
For
Uh,
for me, one thing I want to point out first, well, from what you just said is I think Chris is the one who mentioned this. This is when we went on the stacked cast with D Shell and Anas. But I forget what the exact question was, but I think the general topic was like what makes a good coach. But I think it was Chris who said like how quickly you can like get shit done, basically like how quickly you can resolve a problem. I feel like that's the one big thing with in person is just like you have the person there, you can just trial X, Y, and Z. And especially with like a lot of like, I feel like how, you know, the more modern day bigger coaches operate, and even ourselves, like me, Chris, and Andy. I don't know your like system of communication, but like where we have someone like train and then update after, it's just like Andy said, like sometimes I can take multiple sessions to just get something simple done when in person you can, it's like it can happen at the snap of the fingers. I feel like that's the biggest like benefit from being in person.
Yeah, and one of the other things, I mean, it doesn't always happen this way, but I think Eric has mentioned doing this before is like meeting up with someone at the gym, like when you know you're gonna have a certain session and you just want to like go over it in person or whatever. Definitely the biggest benefit for me is when like someone who I'm working with and they're doing more of the online coaching stuff, like if we've talked about a concept to their training and then like I know they're going to be in on that day, so I message them in advance. I'm like, hey, what time are you going to be at the gym? And so that way I can see it in person, especially if I'm going to be there anyways. I mean, I live about 20 minutes away from the gym, so I'm usually not like texting people and then driving over, like trying to race during their session or anything like that. But most of the time, if I can get to a place where I know someone's going to be in and I'm going to be there anyways, I'll try to, whatever we've been working on for that movement, watch them and try to reinforce whatever that thing is. And it definitely, from a time standpoint of trying to work on something, like you said, it makes it so much more efficient. And that's the downside of doing the online stuff. As I know all of you guys know, like you said, it like getting something done can take a lot longer than it probably should just because of the stack of communication window that you guys have with your clients. Um, so that's definitely the biggest benefit, I would say, is the ability to troubleshoot things in person, or even just like, you see someone kind of doing something sloppy and you can walk over and be like, hey, don't forget to do this that we talked about, sort of thing. And so it helps with, establishing habits and good technique, but also just reinforcing things. Say someone's doing an accessory and you can tell that they're just kind of like throwing the weight around and not really focusing on it at all. You can just tap them on the shoulder, remind them how to do it a little bit better and move on. And I mean they're paying you anyways for coaching, so it's not like you're invading their workout and throwing them off guard or anything like that. It does allow for a lot of freedom to try to improve the quality of people's training, I feel like.
Yeah, I think you hear a lot about how how much of a benefit it is to have the in-person experience before going into the online coaching. Because maybe it's easier to point things out or whatever. But have you noticed the opposite, like anything about coaching online being able to translate into your in-person and improving your system there? Or is it purely just like, you know, in person is easier because you have them in front of you, and then it kind of increases your skill set in the online stuff?
I think that there is an important aspect to online coaching, which is it's not like exclusive that you could never make it important and in person too. But I do think what you have to be able to do with online coaching is be efficient in your wording. And because like you don't have that ability to like stand next to them and be like, okay, try this. And then it doesn't work. And you're like, okay, try it like this and try it like this. And that takes, 5 minutes of in person in order to troubleshoot it over and over and over again until you find something that clicks versus online. If you're super wordy and you can't really get your point across and you can't be efficient at getting people to do what they need to do in order to be better at the movement, then that's a super inefficient way to spend your time as an online coach. And I do think that that's one of the things you get a lot better at through doing the online coaching thing is instead of sending a 20-minute voice message of trying to explain to someone how foot pressure works. If you can get that down to a 2-minute voice message and you're super efficient at explaining it, you are only going to be more efficient at explaining it in person, obviously. And I think that is definitely something I've been able to take from online coaching and bring into in person is trying to get more efficient with my wording, just because you don't have the luxury of trying something, seeing if it works, and 30 seconds later being able to try something else versus if you guys said that you does everyone, or I know Devin does at least, not have them talk to you during training in most cases?
I think we
Yeah.
all work that way, yeah.
You guys all work that way? So yeah, I mean, if someone is having a lot of thoughts about how something is going, and after the session they're talking to you about it, and you're able to zip them, back a whatever written message or a voice message, that is super concise and clear and efficient of getting the point across to that person or the cue or whatever process you're talking about with them. I think very, very important thing. I don't want to just keep repeating myself over and over again, which I feel like I'm getting to the point too. But yeah, that's what I would say.
I
Yeah.
think another thing too is like, and I'm thinking back now to like my experience when I was coaching in person at Champion is like when you're there with the person and you're kind of looking for, problems or you're looking for a solution, like you're very much like focusing on the moment and like what the person is doing. And then like you're kind of expanding outwards after that. Versus I feel like with online coaching, you're looking outwards and then kind of centering in after the fact, if that makes sense. Like you might look at like you see something go wrong on like their primary bench day, for example, and you're going to look at like programming, you're going to look at like, okay, why did this happen? And then kind of center in on the actual like set itself by the end of it or by the you know by the end of the session, whatever it may be. Versus like in person, you're going to look at like, okay, what exactly happened here, and then probably expand outwards after that. Like I feel like when I was in person coaching, like I was never the programming side of things was very much like the last kind of thought in the chain
Yeah,
versus like online coaching, it's almost the opposite.
it's a good point. And I think also there's an element to that where it's like the benefit of the online portion of it, especially in the context of getting videos of someone's training. You're obviously you can have the program there looking at whatever it is. And at the same time, you can rewatch whatever it is. A lot of the times in person, you're very, the training session as a whole, but also trying to figure things out is very dependent on your ability to pick things up in the
Yep.
moment and apply them, whether you catch it or not. And I think you definitely run into in person, you definitely can see a lot of movement and efficiency because you have the ability to move around the person, see from multiple perspectives, that sort of thing. So you can definitely get a lot from that. But like, say you have someone fail a heavy bench and you're spotting them and you're like over your ability to give them critical feedback of what they may or may have not done wrong on bench press is pretty limited. And that's definitely an aspect where I think online shines is being able to, like you said, have the big scope of everything, and then you're able to zoom in on whatever you think the cause of that is. Versus in person, you're very much just like what's there is in front of you. And hopefully you picked up on it and you were able to make a suggestion of whether changing technique or trying out something different, or the reason why someone missed the lift. It's very, very dependent on you actually being right, which
Yeah.
is obviously, all things are somewhat dependent on you being right in coaching. But it does feel like the stakes are maybe not higher, isn't the right word, but the moments are where the stakes are very high of someone getting a lift or going for something or whatever. If you don't pick up on it, then it's very hard to make corrections from that point.
Yeah.
There's two things I feel like also play a huge role in terms of like how successful a coach and client are working together online versus in person. The one is just like how much the client values and needs feedback. Like, say someone who's like our friend Johnny, who doesn't really like touching base with a coach every day. He pays for a weekly service with his coach. I feel like someone like that would do well with like more of an online basis where they can communicate with their coach at their own will, barring it's within, the coach's expectations and stuff. And then the second one is kind of like how the coach would operate too, where maybe someone who doesn't, deal well with the neuroticism or the super quick feedback and prefers more of like a structured approach might do better with like an online, structure, I guess, if that makes sense. And another big one, actually, now that I think about it, is also just like how experienced someone is. Because obviously, I feel like what we're kind of talking about right now is the biggest pro to in-person coaching is like technique evaluation. And obviously, if someone's, a super high level power lifter who's been doing it for a decade, there's not even that much of that to do in person. You know what I mean? So I feel like
Yeah.
there's a spectrum that things can kind of swing. Like for the higher level lifters, I feel like, the online is I don't really see an argument to go in person versus online in that case, when obviously if you're just starting powerlifting, it's your first year, you can probably get something out of an in-person session every single session, multiple times a session. You know what I mean?
I
Yeah.
feel like it's really
Uh,
just like it starts heavy at the beginning, and then it just like as your experience level goes on, it gets less and less useful as time goes on.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
yeah.
if you're a super beginner, you can make a change and then immediately see the impact. If you've been powerlifting for 7 years and you make a change, it's like you're waiting like a block or two to see what the
Yeah.
impact of that change is. So it's not like
Yeah.
something you can really even do in person for someone that's like a higher level powerlifter.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I can even think of an example of someone who's a higher level power lifter who like routinely does in-person training. I mean, there's obviously people who work with like a physical therapist or something like that, and they see them on a
Right.
routine basis to like evaluate movement efficiency or working through an injury, whatever it might be. But I definitely would say, trying to think of a timeline. Yeah, probably most lifters within the range of like 1 to 3 years of powerlifting could stand to benefit from some form of in-person coaching. But I mean, as you guys and myself, I think has everyone here been doing it for more than like 3 years?
About that, yeah.
Of like,
Yeah.
yeah, like around that point. Like the takeaway of any of us getting coached in person by another powerlifting coach is going to be pretty negligible.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, but I don't really have any super experienced lifters who do solely in-person training with me. Um, yeah.
Chris or Devin, would either of you guys ever coach in person?
I've thought about doing it purely for the every powerlifting coach that I know that has experience with in-person coaching always says, "Oh my God, it's such a game changer." It's this massive help on the online portion when you already have this in-person experience. Um, for that reason, I've thought about it. So maybe at some point, if I feel like I could benefit from that, but it would just be to make the online service better, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about it too deep because I agree. Like, I think everyone, all the higher level coaches are like, oh, if you're trying to get powerlifting coaching, you should start in person and build from there. But for me, two things that immediately come to mind are one, that to be honest, say I'm coaching someone powerlifting only, like, powerlifter in person, say their session takes on average like an hour and a half. That's an hour and a half that I'm focusing on that one client 4 to 5 days a week. That's also just got to take away from the other amount of clients I have to program for, give feedback to, make a block overview video for, stuff like that. So sure, it's only, say I only have one person that I need to allocate an hour and a half to a day, 4 to 5 days a week. Maybe that comes to two people, that's going to double. It's going to take away more from the time I have to operate online. That's the first thing. And the second thing was actually, I completely forget that. But yeah, I mean, just pretty much along the line of just like the second one was actually just the fact that I'm trying to create like the most equal service possible. Not to say that I can't like branch away from that, but like, I don't know. The way I'm operating right now is very, trying to keep things equal because I coach people in different countries across the country and locally. So I don't want the people who are local to like have access to something someone else doesn't. But again, like I feel like how much does that matter as long as I'm explicitly offering an in-person service to someone versus not?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about that before. What you're talking about right now is like the value of the service for clients that I have that I see in person and can talk about what they're doing in person when I see them and things like that, as opposed to someone who I might never see in person because they're on the other side of the states or for whatever reason it might be. Um, and I wouldn't see their training in person, I mean to say. Um, but the mindset I've had to take with it more so is it's not like exclusive to these people for any reason other than that we're all local to each other, right? We see each other at the same gym, things like that, and the other clients might not have the same opportunity in order to be there, but obviously if they were there, I would do the exact same thing with them. But I haven't ran into any issues of anyone thinking that they are like getting gypped on their service because they live further away than another client, because I think mostly what it comes down to is kind of what we talked about, like the troubleshooting aspect of seeing things in person, or like being able to be like, oh, we don't have to schedule a call, we don't have to send voice messages back and forth sort of deal. You're just both there in person and they're training. And so it makes the most sense to just look at what they're doing and talk about it in person.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I totally understand what you're saying. And I definitely think that there is a lot of value in making sure that the services that you are giving aren't super widely different for people, say, paying the same amount. But I do think when it comes to the in-person stuff, you definitely find it pretty different from what your experience is from coaching people online. And at least in my experience, it's been very casual and nonchalant in terms of like you just see someone, you're like, oh hey, like we were literally just talking about this yesterday working on your bench. Let's just talk about it right now while we're both here.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I feel like it's a little far removed at that point too, where it's like, let use like a concert for example, like an artist. If an artist is gonna like have a concert somewhere, like they're not gonna not do that out of the fairness for like everyone else in the world who can't show up for this one concert. Like it's a thing that is available for the people who are, you know, within
Yeah,
the vicinity of that service.
and I usually will do like for the group of specifically power lifters, I would say that we have at our gym, like there's a group chat on Instagram or whatever. And usually I'll try to throw out like if I'm going to be there on Saturday or on Sunday, where people, I mean, I have most of the people that I coach have at least one session between Saturday and Sunday. And so I try to make myself available a little bit on the weekends if I know I'm going to be in. Either that is, I know I'm going to work out and that's going to take an hour and a half, let's say, but I will put myself there for 3 hours. So I have a pretty big degree of flexibility and I can just send a chat out to those people and be like, hey, I'll be at the gym at this time if anyone needs a spot or anything like that. And then usually it's not like becoming full on training sessions with those people, but there's kind of that open invitation. And I mean, all the people in that group chat are both people who I coach and don't coach. It comes more with the territory, I would say, of just working out of the gym and wanting to be a resource that people have that they don't constantly have to pay for my time.
Okay, I have something to add that we had written down, which I think intertwines what we're talking about with in person versus online nicely. Is what do you like? How do you envision building a relationship with a client? Like, do you do that differently online versus in person, or like I know Alex, for example, Alex Tran really values like the interpersonal relationship and you know just forming that by means of creating buy-in and just forming a good relationship, like kind of being friendly, you know what I mean? But like do you see any differences with in-person versus online people that you coach, or how do you like approach that or view that concept in general?
I I don't know if I would say that the way that I do it is the right way, but I can try to give you an honest answer. Um, the in-person side of things is really on a case-by-case basis. Some people are super interested in being friends and chatting about life and all sorts of stuff. And other people just like I had a client once who like just asked if he could keep one earbud in the whole time, just like listening to music. And like just that like I tell him what to do on the exercise and like let him know if he's doing it wrong. And like and he was paying, so
Yeah.
I told him okay. Um, but like I've had people like that who like aren't really that interested in knowing anything about me or me to know anything about them. They just want to like work out and know if they're doing it correctly. And like I said, I have other people who are like they want to be friendly and know about each other and all of that stuff. So definitely a spectrum there. The online side of things is challenging, and I know that you have much um, I would say better managed systems than me with my clients. I definitely have people who are not great at communicating. And so that makes any sort of interpersonal relationship that we develop as a coach and a client really difficult outside of training. There's other people who are just fine about that. And we have conversations that are both training and non training related. feel like I try my best to bridge the gap with Instagram for the people that do have it. And trying to keep all of the like training communication stuff in WhatsApp, and then whatever other stuff, whether it be a reel, like whatever, a meme lifting reel that someone will send me and then us chatting about that, or, clients who are interested in the same sort of shows or music or whatever it is, communicating about that sort of stuff on social media with each other. And so establishing for there to be a little bit of a separation between the times that we talk about training and the times that we talk about other stuff. But I don't know. I would say it's a mixed bag. I definitely do not have as formal of a structure as I know that you guys do with like strict communication time, WhatsApp only kind of stuff. I would say, probably 85% of my roster does that pretty well. And I'm pretty flexible with the other 15% because I know I probably won't hear from them very much at all if I uphold, which, there's a different level of importance that each of us can put on that sort of thing in our own coaching relationships with our client. For me, I'm definitely more willing to give leeway on that sort of stuff if it leads for a very consistent communication with the person.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Chris and Annie can agree, but there's always people who aren't perfect with communication. There's always someone slacking in some regard, even though regardless of how strict you get with the communication system and how that looks in general, there's always going to be people who don't do what you want. Even Andrew's dealing with that right now. So, there's
Yeah,
it's going to happen.
yeah. I do my best to be understanding towards people. I think I'm pretty empathetic towards people. I think it's one of the things that attracts certain people to me as a coach is I'm pretty understanding and willing to like talk to and adapt training to whatever someone's going through. Not that I don't think you guys wouldn't do similar things for your clients, but I do think it's one of those things that there's a few people on my roster who have pretty turbulent lives, and so being able to communicate with me on a regular basis and feeling like they're not going to get a bunch of judgment, or like, what would be the right word? Not punishment, but like reprimand them for doing things outside of the established norm that we've settled. I'm pretty
Yeah.
easygoing in that regard. And like I said, I think that's one of my strengths, but I also think it's one of those things that works with a certain type of clientele. And I've definitely had clients who have kind of abused that before, where you're very lenient with them and you try to be very understanding to what they're going through. And then they just continuously drop the ball, no matter if their circumstances are good or bad. They just only talk to you about it when it's bad.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's one of those things that I do think is a positive quality, but it definitely comes around to bite me in the ass every once in a
Yeah. This is something I was talking about with one of my own athletes this morning actually. But I feel like for athletes that are, more friendly with their coaches, say maybe like a coach starts coaching one of their current friends that, like that's how I'm sure all four of us started out. Like you started coaching people you're friends with for the most part.
while.
Um, so for examples like that, or for say clients that have become more friendly with their coach um, over time, I feel like there's a very necessary like line that may need to be drawn with actually establishing that, coach and lifter relationship versus like the friend to friend relationship outside of that. But I also feel like, and this is what I said to my lifter this morning as well, I feel like some people just do really well with just like being friends with their coach and having that be like their primary relationship. You know what I mean? Like there are some people out there who are straight up dating their coach and doing really well with it. There are some people who don't really take the sport that seriously. I don't know if that's a good way to put it, but they don't really like have expectations to be at a high level, and they do really well with just kind of like being friends with their coach and having it being very informal. So I don't know. It's interesting to think about like what the athlete's needs are versus how that reflects on their relationship with their coach, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can definitely I like you said, like there's some people who do really, really well with it. But I think there's also other people who they just think that's what they should do, maybe because of relationships that they've had with previous coaches tied to powerlifting or other sports growing up, whatever it be, that they like think that they should have that friendly relationship with them. In reality, they would do better with a more like structured approach to communication with their coach and how they go through things. But I definitely think there is a good amount of people who need to be floating that like friend relationship in order to get the most out of it. I mean, I'm sure your guys' clients would say, regardless of however you feel about them, which most of us, I assume, feel good about most of our clients, but they would probably speak pretty positively of you guys in a friendly way. Like you guys are friendly with each other. And I
Right.
definitely think at a baseline that's necessary, and the coaches that are really brash with their lifters are definite. Some people do well with that. Some people like want to be yelled at by their coach and told that they suck. But I do think most people need that a little bit of friendship in there.
I remember Matt Nichols working with Steve initially. I forget if he put it in his intake form or whatever, but he was one of those people where he's like, "Oh, like if I'm slipping up on the slightest, I need you to, put the hammer down." So yeah, I think that definitely fits what you're saying.
Yeah, and I mean, I've had a couple of clients who like told me, they're like, "Hey, like don't be too nice to me. Like if I need to shape up, tell me to shape up." And like I do it, but in reality, I feel like people who usually tell you like, "Hey, don't be afraid to like be mean to me to get me to do whatever they need to do." Those people are usually pretty locked in anyways, and so
Yeah.
they don't really need to be talked to harshly. And like if you do have a stern talk with them, it's really not difficult because you know that that person is good with taking things seriously. It's usually the people who are a little too buddy buddy when you have to, put on the coaching pants and say like, "Hey, you are sucking and you have to stop sucking in order to make progress." That's usually where the most difficult conversations are had.
Yeah.
Yep. Um, what is your training looking like right now? Are you being self-coached? Are you on program?
Uh, Currently self-coaching, but I wouldn't say that I'm like entirely off of my coach's roster. Um, but I mean, I told him that I was taking some time to just do my own thing. Between like all of last week, I was sick, and then at the beginning of January, I hurt my back, and I kind of made a decision without my coach. Sorry, Chris, that I was just going to kind of do my own thing. But me and him have always had a little bit more of a casual relationship, just because I think I've talked to you guys about this before, but I might as well mention it while we're here. Is like me and him met at both of our first meets, and then we like he was further along. He was a grad assistant with the strength conditioning program, and I was in the internship with it. So like we worked together coaching athletes, but like he was 2 years further along in school than me. And so like I took a lot away from him and I learned a lot from him. And so like we just kind of naturally stepped into like that coach client relationship because he was doing powerlifting and getting into the coaching side while I was just kind of like opening the book on coaching myself. And so we had a really good relationship that way. But also we were very friendly. I mean, we were essentially coworkers and hung out all the time too. So for us, I think we have a little bit different of a dynamic than most people. And so the sort of things that we do, like I said, I was like, just told them that like I was going to kind of take the reins and deal with it on my own for the minute. Isn't something I would say that most people should do. But we've been working together for multiple years, and there's been a couple times where things have come up, and I've just told him that I'm going to do my own thing for a minute, but that I will come back around and let him know whether or not I'm ready to continue on what we're doing, or if I'm going to continue doing my own thing for a minute. Um, and I mean, it's worked pretty well so far. It's
Six
definitely
hundred
not the
pound
professional approach.
six
Oh
hundred
yeah,
pound
I
SSB soon.
was gonna say yeah.
It,
Or what
it,
did you
it
you
went.
hit 600, right? What did you squat in the
I,
SSB?
I did it today. I hit
Yeah,
606
Let's
speed.
go.
yeah. When was your first meet?
My first meet was at the end of 2020.
2020. Yeah, I'm trying to think like what the general programming at that time was looking like. Like, what are there any things that you've kind of shifted
Oh,
180 on in terms of
dude,
programming philosophy?
I sucked at programming in my first meet, man. I was awful. I was running Jeff Nippard programs basically for most of the year. And then, sorry, let me go back. Most of the year for like 2019 and then into 2020, and then COVID happened. And so then like my roommate had like kind of a self-made rack that we put on our little patio outside that we could like we used like a cooler as a bench, and so our ass was just hanging off of it, just our back was supported.
Uh-huh.
Benching that, squatting off of it, deadlifting off of the concrete. And so like we basically just did that all through the summer of 2020 because everything was closed for COVID, and then gym opened back up for us in the fall. We were able to lift, but it was literally just like searching stuff up on Reddit and YouTube channels and like copying like whatever they said to do and mixing and matching different programs and not knowing at all what I was really doing. Um, and then I maxed out on all my lifts 4 weeks out to know what my maxes were,
Nice.
and then tried to peek into the meet. I did okay for
Nice.
a first meet. It wasn't like awful, but my meet prep was pretty trash.
Nice. That's
I
funny.
actually also I have a client from my first meet. I forgot about that. Justin Dam.
Oh, look at that. That was a while ago.
Yeah.
I for my first prep, um, I don't know if you remember this, but I think I mentioned this maybe on here before, but Sean Noriega used to he had like a I don't know, like a few weeks stint or
Oh
maybe
yeah.
a month or two stint where he was posting his programming on his story, and I would just screenshot and then run that. So my prep into my first meet was just like a modified version of what he was running, which was 3 times a week squat, 5 times a week bench, and twice a week deadlift with like a 4x10 on the secondary day. And I was in so much pain the whole time. Like my knees hurt so bad. Um, and then I tapered, meaning I like did like 40% on everything for a week. And then I felt great on meet day. I was like, oh my God, I'm a genius. Just because I stopped being in pain from trying to force myself to squat 3 times a week and sumo deadlift twice.
I don't
I
know.
mean, the
It
three
seems like
times
it
a week
worked out
squat
for you.
still works.
Yeah, but it didn't at the time. I didn't need that. No. Yeah.
It seemed to have worked for your bench. I think you still bench
Yeah.
more.
Well, right now I'm on 4, but that's just like scheduling stuff. My bench is strongest on 5. Yeah. The bench worked. That program took me from like a 315 bench, that general program, to 400 within like a year and a half,
That's so insane.
but just bench.
Just bench.
I don't think I added anything to my deadlift. I think I probably regressed.
That's okay.
That's okay. Yeah. But yeah, I guess in terms of like your earliest, what do you think Jeff Nippard and that kind of era was like your early
That was
influences in
definitely
programming?
like when I was getting into, I mean, of course, like everyone else, okay, maybe not like everyone else. There was like the Russ stage of your powerlifting journey where you like tap in to Russ and get better today. That
Hmm.
was like after my first meet for me. Like I did my first meet and then I discovered Russ and I was like, oh my, this is so sick. Powerlifting is
Holy fuck.
so cool. Look at this guy, he does it. Uh,
Uh,
no, so it was like before I really got into it, it was a lot of Jeff Nippard programs and then just like writing my own BS programs where I would, do like I would read one study about volume and like double the amount of sets I would do that week. And then I would be like, I don't know if this is actually working. I guess I'll just go change my program again.
Nice.
So I was really bad about that. I was super neurotic when it came to changing things to try to get them to be like as optimal as possible. But then like, I don't know, it was sort of random stuff leading into the first meet. And then I kind of found I don't know if you just call it the more like modernized RPE approach kind of after my first meet and started writing things around RPE more. But I mostly programmed for myself into my next meet, which was like 5 months after the first one that I did. It was pretty good. I had pretty tangible improvement. And then from there on, that's when I started with my coach the following summer. And I mean, he was closer to what I was doing than not. Um, but it was still very much like he actually understood like periodization and things on a level where it was like, hey, in order for it to work, you need to like not change your program every 3 to 5 weeks. You should actually like think about it a little bit more than that. And that was pretty much when he was in charge of my training from then on.
Yeah. Do you guys know who I got a good bit of influence from starting out? That was Chance Mitchell
Oh
on
yeah.
on podcasts. I have two vivid memories of him. I think it was him at least. I think he was like arguing with Steve on a podcast about like tempo versus pause squats.
Nice.
Um, and then he was on the High Bar podcast with Sean Orega, and there was a lot of stuff on that podcast that I remember I like listened to that episode like 3 times back like years ago.
Mhm.
But like I don't know, Chance was like that probably one of my very early on like I don't know, just like kind of like follow them like closely on Instagram type of influencers for me.
Chance was popping. I was also somewhat down the like Stronger by Science
Yeah,
pipeline as well. I
Mm.
was
that
pretty
was
tapped into what they were doing too.
I was taking I forget, I think it was Greg Knuckles. I was taking his free programs when I initially, like, this was in my prep for my first meet. I was taking his free programs and he had layouts for like squat, bench, and deadlift. And I took his 3 time a week squat, his 3 time a week bench, his twice a week deadlift. And I just like combined it all and I was like, yep, this is gonna work for me. And then I would run it. The first like block of it would go great, and then I would run it again and be in a ton of pain. And then I would try and switch things around, and it would be the same like cycle of like, hey, this block went well, and then I do it again, and it just fucking hurts. And I did that for like 8 months, I think, before I ran a juggernaut program into my first meet, and then I got a coach after that.
Nice.
Hell yeah.
Yeah,
Hell yeah. Uh Dude, Greg was strong as hell in the day. I
was
don't
he?
think he's pushing. He's pretty strong. I think I saw him squat like 6 or 700, which I mean like
Yeah,
listen,
Oh
I
wow.
understand we're all powerlifting coaches and we see strong people all the time, but like it was just like him in his garage, like squatting like 6 or 700 pounds,
yeah.
just like his $5 Costco t-shirt and pants, just like getting after it for no reason other than that he wanted to. Um, yeah, watching his training, I remember being very entertaining to me for a while.
Yeah.
So I think one more bigger topic we can run through
Yeah.
um, is what you mentioned about just like updated techniques that we've started using ever since the onset of coaching. If you wanted to like explain what you mean in general.
Yeah. So I think a part of that is more so like troubleshooting stuff. Like, if you guys have examples of your own lifters, and that would be great. But like, I definitely started out in like I guess as a little bit of Dunning-Kruger effect, of like, very beginning of my literature, I was like, oh yeah, like everything, whatever, anything works. I don't really know anything about anything. So like you just try stuff, you see what works, you see what doesn't work. And then going through school, like following certain, I don't know if you want fitness influencers, coaches, all the different people that you're following, like you saw different methodologies. And then I know at one point or other, we all were looking at, Flex, Mitchell, Steve Denovi, all like those different guys were doing. And like a lot of the things that fell onto like the raw tested side of powerlifting that were like the meta of using RPE, percentage based back offsets sort of deal, and not really playing around with crazy variations and things like that. Um, and so for a long time for me, I think I would say from like 2021 to probably last year, I was pretty strict on the sort of things that I would pursue. There was a lot of variations and ideas that I was pretty turned off to just because it was like, well, like, I don't know. XYZ lifter never had to use this and they are a world record holder, or I know
Yeah.
all these people and none of them have ever said that they use this, so I'm not going to try to use that. Even if someone was like, oh, you should, this is a dumb example because I would never use like reverse banded squats or something like that to grow someone's squat. Because I think like that definitely falls on the spectrum of things that there's a lot more efficient ways to get someone to squat more. But like big one for, and I've talked about this before with you guys and at other points, but like block press for me has made its way as a pretty regular rotation for a variation for guys to use. Um, it's definitely not one of those things that like I have every lifter to do, but there was a long time that like I was put off to anything that wasn't like the bar and you controlling it, whether that be tempo, pause, Larson, something along those lines. And like adding something else like a block was like something else like there's no reason to ever use something like that. But now I've kind of changed and I'm willing to see more options like that through with people's training. And there's been a handful of times that I've gotten really good results with people because of that. And like, there's definitely the argument to be made, like, did you need that specific variation in order to like yield results? And my mentality has shifted to kind of being like, as long as it works, I don't really care if it is like something like, oh, is this the most efficient method? Or was it like really necessary to have this guy do block press as opposed to having him, like maybe you just had exposure timing wrong, or you had this or that wrong sort of thing. And I've just been a lot more open-minded to the solutions for things versus kind of being down and I guess you would say the nitty-gritty programming tactics to get someone to break through a plateau or stop regression or whatever it might be. So that, that's an example of kind of what I was talking about is like if there's things that you guys have shifted on over time. And if you haven't, obviously that's totally fine. But it's always something I'm curious to ask people about is like, did you really start either against something or pretty impartial to thing and it's ended up actually coming around full circle to now you're like pretty open to it or you like applying it for your lifters?
For me, I think it's pretty rare that I'll, you know, kind of just go 180 on something and like change my mind on it. It's more of like a gradual, like over time, you kind of just shift into a
Sure,
direction.
sure.
But I think I answered this on a story, like in a Q&A story post like a week or two ago. But two things that I think I've kind of shifted into over maybe the past year, has been just like general peaking philosophy, which I think we talked about a lot on this podcast, um, and just like timing of things, and also I guess the purpose of labeling days primary, secondary, tertiary, to where I probably view that a little bit differently than I did maybe 2 years ago.
For me, um, a very specific thing doesn't come into mind immediately, but something that did come into mind for an answer that's less specific and is more like broad is more so just like to not immediately trust something. I don't know if trust is the right word, but like think for yourself kind of thing. Because like when I was starting out, like it was just like ingest the information, watch all the content, and apply it, you know? But it's
Yeah.
like it's okay to read someone's case study or watch someone's YouTube video on a topic on powerlifting coaching and disagree with it. You know what I mean? And just kind of like think for myself because maybe that's just like an experience level thing because now I've been coaching for a much longer time than obviously when I was starting out. But like, I think the one thing that I've changed, I guess, or am viewing differently is that like it's okay to not always have X equals Y. Like I forget who posted a story about it recently. It actually might have been like Anas or
It
something.
wasn't us, yeah. I saw the same thing, yeah.
Me okay, so you probably know what I'm about to say, but he was like, um, it was something along the lines of like, oh, think outside the box. If the bar feels heavy on the back, the answer isn't always to add more intensity or
Oh
something
yeah, I
like that.
saw that too.
Yeah, it's like it's very true, and I think there's very basic solutions to things that are widely applicable, right? Like, I don't know, say someone's arms are hurting and they have a super narrow grip on low bar, maybe widening the grip will like take stress off. I don't know, just a random example, but it's like that doesn't always equate to what you want. So thinking outside of the box and like applying things that you feel like are going to work, even though they might go against the norm, like the block press thing you're saying, like how you've shifted on that, like the block press in modern day powerlifting coaching is very uncommonly used. So it's like you're not in the wrong for not doing what most people do, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I mean, for that specifically for me, it's like it's one of those things where I was having someone who's a very strong bencher. Like we've been able to replicate him benching around 400 pounds for like over a year. But it was one of those things where like on the platform, we were like always around 400, regardless of we did like training to the meet, more aggressive peak and taper. This was showing up about the same, and it was always like his lockout strength that was the issue. And that was always the thing that we were having to manage. Like he could get 400 off of his chest 7 days a week. His locking it out, that was always the challenge. And so it was more of just one of those things where we had like again he had suggested that like oh when my bench blew up the most when I was doing my own programming like I was doing static holds and I was like well I don't know if that really helps with this but we can try them and like it helped a little bit like it helped a little bit with his confidence I would say more than anything but it wasn't a real adaptation that meant anything to produce progress
Yeah.
but then we tried doing block training and like his meet best and well, we went for like a PR in March and he didn't get it. And so like his best in meet had been 396 from his meet prior versus 5 or 6 months later he got 418 on bench with like room in the tank. And all that we really did to change his bench press was like we added block press so that he just got like more lockout training and we just weren't able to get it from like the prep prior trying to do like more tricep training trying to like emphasize his triceps but it just became one of those things where the skill of locking out the bench press and getting that specific adaptation of him just getting stronger at doing that wasn't something we could find a way to bring about through other means
Yeah.
and so it just seemed like the most obvious option was to just do something that slightly reduced his range of motion and allow him to work on his lockout strength more. And it ended up working out just fine. And like I said, it's one of those things that I was pretty against trying out. You know, I would have been 2 years ago, but seeing something trying out multiple things and not having it work, it was like, well, like you said, just time to go outside of the box and like probably need to stop assuming that this won't work just because I have a notion about it that it won't work. And it ended up working.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that brings up a really good point of like, um, because block press for lockout strength isn't used that often, I'd say, in like modern programming, same way that like, I don't know, block pulls for lockout on deadlift or old cues like saying pin your shoulder blades down and back on bench
Sure.
or push your knees out on squat. But you know, I'll tell someone to push their knees out on squat, and sometimes it's the right thing to do, people can say that like, oh, that's an outdated cue, and it's like, okay, but why did it work though? Why did it look better
Yeah.
after I gave them the cue then? So there's definitely cases where like all this stuff works. It's just like it's not a one size fits all. Everyone should be doing this.
Yeah. And I don't know who said it. It might have been, I'm going to attribute it to Steve Denovi. I don't know if it was him, but like I think I remember him either talking about at some point, him like talking about like there's so many options of things you can do. Like it doesn't really make sense to write something off like ahead of time of actually trying it. And while it may not be like your first, second, third, fourth option, whatever it might be in that instance, like completely writing it off before it has any opportunity to like see if you can actually make a tangible adaptation from using it is usually going to set you back more than it's going to like put you ahead of finding the right result. And I think that was at least in this specific instance for us is we were kind of looking for every other solution than adding in something that wasn't the conventional method of like raw powerlifting in 2024, 2025. But then it ended up being the thing that worked without any flaw really at all and made it super easy for him to improve that week point.
It's coming back into the meta. Nori posted about
Block
it
press?
the other day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
I
my
had
God.
I had a client do block press recently. It was pain related though, so I guess that's not really
Yeah.
I think Nora was talking about pain relief.
Nori's been looking at my programs. It's okay.
Andy, do you have anything that you say answer?
Uh, like honestly, nothing comes to mind really. I feel like at the beginning of my coaching journey, I was a little guilty of like seeing things or like learning about something and then like trying to apply it where it might not necessarily be like the most sensible thing to apply to that situation. So I think like thinking now more in like principles and just like understanding things better before jumping to apply it to someone is something that I've gotten better at personally. But nothing like concept wise that I can think of off the top of my head that I've like 180'd about over time.
For
Yeah, I
sure.
find it's pretty rare to just like actively like change your mind. Like, oh, I was, you know, just
Yeah,
flip a
yeah, I
switch.
guess I worded the proposal of the question wrong. More of one of those like gradual things that you've shifted on, not so much like a complete 180 in one day your perspective was changed.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Do we want to cap it there? We have 3 minutes left.
Yeah, that's
Okay, then yeah, okay.
Kevin, that's
that
the question.
was maybe over an hour, right? Has been over an hour actually.
That was well over
It
an
was.
hour.
Oh,
Well,
really? Oh.
no,
Right.
well, it was probably like an hour and 5 minutes.
It was
Chris,
like 3 hours.
ready to go again?
Devin, you're killing me.
Oh,
I need this
the
special question.
question was about the SSB, but we already got to that. So yeah.
Oh, is it
Devastating.
just like why did your SSB
Okay,
blow up?
Well, because your SSB is like the same as your low bar squad, is it not?
it's pretty close. It's pretty
Yeah.
close. I don't
Right.
know why. I the best answer I have for it is that I've been doing SSB as my secondary squat for like probably close to 2 years. So I'm really efficient at SSB squatting. Um, and I think that I've gotten to a point with like being efficient at it. It's very similar to my normal squat pattern. It
Yeah,
doesn't feel that different.
practice basically. Yeah.
Dude, I've
Yeah,
been
I
doing
think
SSB for like a year and a half now. My SSB is fucking nowhere near my comp squat.
well,
Oh,
I didn't
Can
say
I
I had
hold
the
on?
answer. It was my
Can I
best
can I
guess.
can I jump in for a second? We have
Yeah,
a little
we have
under
to do
two
the
minutes.
outro.
We gotta do the outro. We're gonna lose the
do your silly little outro, Chris. Go.
let's
Oh,
Oh, I like it.
huh?
I
I
like
like it
it.
too. It's
I
good.
like it too. All right.
Do
Thank
your
you,
thing.
everyone. Hey, thank you everyone for listening. And thank you, Madison, for coming on. Madison, you have an Instagram that you want to plug, tell people where to find you.
yeah. You can find me at Matyson, just my first name, Matyson. I have coaching page, Frazier Strength Systems, but I'm less active on there than my personal page. I use more of that. Yeah, that's pretty much where all of my content is just on Instagram.
Sweet. Go follow Madison on Instagram. You can listen to this on Spotify and YouTube and follow us at Triumph S&P.